You know, if you spend any time at all online, you've probably seen them. These amazing, glamorous, vintage photos of Iran from back in the 60s and 70s. And they always spark this huge debate. But it really all boils down to this one big question.
Was life in Iran really better before 1979? Was it this golden age of progress and freedom that we see in the pictures? Or was it something else entirely? Look, the internet is just packed with super strong opinions, right? But the real story, well, that's buried in the data, in the experiences of everyday people. So, okay, let's actually get into it.
So here's what we're going to do. Instead of just picking a side, we're going to try to moderate this whole historical debate. We'll use the data, look at the arguments for both eras, and really try to unpack the trade-offs, the myths, and the realities.
All right, round one, the economy. This is where the whole argument for a golden era really kicks off, and honestly, with some pretty impressive numbers.
I mean, just look at this contrast. Before 1979, under the Shah, the economy was absolutely on fire. We're talking an average of 9% growth a year. After the revolution, whoa, that number just plummets to under 2%. So on the surface, you'd think, okay, case closed. The golden era wins. But as you're about to see, that's really only half the story.
See, you have to understand why that massive drop happened. It's not so simple. The post-1979 economy got slammed by two huge events. First, the absolutely devastating 8-year war with Iraq, and then on top of that, more than 4 decades of crippling international economic sanctions. Those two things make a simple side-by-side comparison of growth numbers, well, it gets really, really tricky.
And this gets to the other side of the economic coin, equity. Because sure, the Shah's economy was growing like crazy, but who was getting that wealth? It wasn't being shared equally, not even close. In fact, research shows this huge gap between the rich and poor was one of the main things that fueled the revolution. The new government, well, their focus totally shifted. It wasn't about pure growth anymore, it was about social justice and trying to redistribute that wealth.
Okay, let's move on to round two, which builds right on top of this. Quality of life. And this is where we really start to see the story of two completely different Irans existing in the exact same country at the exact same time. You know that Iran we see in all those nostalgic social media posts? The one that looks kind of like Europe with the Western clothes and the glamorous lifestyle? Yeah, that was absolutely real. But here's the kicker. Who was it real for? This quote really just gets right to the heart of it. That cosmopolitan, glamorous world, it was mostly for a tiny, wealthy elite, mainly in big cities like Tehran. That was not the reality for the vast majority of people.
For most Iranians, especially out in the countryside, life under the Shah was, well, it was defined by poverty and a real lack of opportunity. Just try to imagine a family living in a village, miles away from the capital. Their reality wasn't glamorous photo shoots. It was this enormous gap between the modernizing cities and everywhere else, where getting access to basics like schools and doctors was a huge struggle.
And get this, just let this number sink in for a second. Before 1979, less than 36% of the entire country could read or write. That one statistic, man, it tells you almost everything you need to know about just how deep that divide was.
Okay, now look at the change. After the revolution, there was this massive push for literacy, especially in those rural areas we were just talking about, and the rate jumped to over 90%. I mean, that is a monumental shift in social development. It was all about focusing on the majority, not just the tiny elite.
And this isn't just about reading and writing. No, research from places like the Belfer Center actually confirms it. For the average Iranian, overall living standards, we're talking access to healthcare, education, basic services, they genuinely improved after the revolution.
All right, this brings us to our final round, and honestly, it's probably the most complicated one, freedom. This is where the trade-offs get even more stark and way more personal.
So, under the Shah, you had this really clear contradiction. For that urban elite we mentioned, there were a lot of visible social freedoms, right? Women could vote, they were active in public life, they could wear Western clothes, but political freedom? That was non-existent for everyone. It was an authoritarian government, and the brutal secret police, the SAVAK, made sure that nobody stepped out of line. No dissent was tolerated, period.
Then, after 1979, that whole equation just flipped. As the Belfer Center study points out, even though material living standards improved for most people, that didn't mean full freedom. New social restrictions were brought in, which especially affected women, and the political limitations,
they stayed.
This table here does a really fantastic job of laying out all these trade-offs. Let's just walk through it real quick. The Shah's era, you got fast economic growth, but with super high inequality. Post-1979, much slower growth, yeah, but inequality was reduced and living standards for the majority actually went up. And check this out. Political freedom. It's listed as low for both. But look at foreign influence. That was a huge reason for the revolution, and it went from high to low, showing this major push for geopolitical independence.
So after all that, what does this all mean? Well, it means that history is almost never a simple story, you know? There's rarely a clear good guy and a clear bad guy. It's really a debate about competing values and different priorities.
I think the most crucial thing to take away from all this is that the whole nostalgic idea of a simple golden era, it's just an incomplete picture. It's a story that's built on the experience of a very privileged, very small group of people, and it completely ignores the struggles of the vast majority of the population back then.
You know, I think this next quote just puts it perfectly. It frames the whole debate not as good versus bad, but as a choice between two totally different paths. One path offered this vision of Western-style modernization, but only for some and without any real political freedom. The other path, it prioritized social justice and independence, but it came with its own set of huge economic challenges and personal restrictions.
At the end of the day, neither period was some kind of perfect paradise. The real story of Iran, both before and after 1979, isn't about figuring out which one was better. It's about trying to understand the incredibly complex and often painful trade-offs that were made between different kinds of progress.
And all of this really leaves us with one final and really important question to think about. How should we measure a nation's progress? Is it in the shiny skyscrapers and the rapid economic growth? Or is it in the literacy rates and the fundamental well-being of its entire population? The answer you land on, well, that shapes your whole view of history.